Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Traveling Therapist Podcast. Really excited today to have Tara Wells here with us. She's got a very cool story. I'm excited to have her share her life and just all of her adventures that she's been through already as a traveling therapist and how she's trying to make it work now in her business and her life. So, Tara, I always start out with how did you go from being just like your traditional therapist to a traveling therapist?
Love that question because I have a little bit of a budding start that really helped. I got licensed during COVID, so I started remote. Have never seen the need to have office space to take up physical space, so
Mhm.
I got that little like step stool forward to disconnect literally and have my IP address or my VPN be anywhere. It was a mental transition of me always wanting to travel. I'm a lifelong traveler and never really considered when I got into the industry how to combine those. And then now the nature of my clients don't mind if as long as I'm in a time zone where I can make it make sense, then why not? So
Yeah.
the transition was much more of a idealistic one. And now as of last year and this year becoming my practice.
Yeah, that's so cool. So tell us a cool fact. Before we could record, you said your first travel experience was when? How old were you?
I was 3 months old. I was born in Washington, DC, and then my family we moved to Ireland. It wasn't a trip. We moved to
Oh,
Ireland.
you moved
Yeah,
there. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Wow.
So
How
I've had
long?
a passport since I was born. My mom was telling the story about how her fingers are in my passport photo because I couldn't lift my head. I was
Oh,
falling asleep during my passport photo. To be
oh my
frowned
gosh.
upon today, but that's my really fun fact of my first flight
Oh my
to
gosh.
Ireland
That's amazing. How long did you live in Ireland?
for a year.
Oh, cool.
For a year.
Okay, that's really neat. So your family, were they like nomadic or was it like a military thing or like why did
It
they?
was an aviation thing.
Wow.
My father was in aviation, so he was working at Shannon Airport at the time.
Oh, that's so cool. Neat. Neat.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you were fully remote from the get-go, which is really cool. Like you didn't
Mhm.
have to worry about that transition like a lot of us did
Oh
trying
my
to figure
gosh,
that
yeah.
part out. Oh my gosh. Luckily I did it before COVID, but yeah, it was still such a shit show, if I'm being blunt.
Absolutely. Yeah,
When
not
that
very
happened.
grateful. Amongst all of the muck of COVID, very
Yeah.
grateful that that kinda set me up on this trajectory.
Yeah. So also, before we hit record, you were kind of talking about, I always like to ask people before we start, like, where have you traveled to? Like, what are you doing? And you were saying that you've actually tried like the traveling therapist thing a few times, and it hasn't been like your favorite thing. So I would love to talk about that a little bit because people don't talk about that as much. It's always like, oh, it's so fun, I love it, but let's hear your side of that. Like
Yeah.
what did you do, and what didn't you like about it, and all of that.
My balancing act with traveling and working, I love a working vacation domestically. I think it makes a lot of sense for me to change the backdrop of the window right next to my office.
Yeah.
When it comes to international travel, which I'm very, very big on when it comes to changing time zones, it gets tricky. Even like if I'm going one time zone away, something gets messed up. Okay. And it's so annoying. It's so
Oh my gosh.
frustrating no matter how many times we practice it and practice the clocks. I don't know why it's so challenging. I swear I'm a smart person. And then all of a
I
sudden that one sends me for a loop.
I hear you, and that's what prompted me. I mean, I'm gonna do a little plug here, right? The portable
Like,
practice method is my new traveling therapist course. It's coming out in like 2 weeks. So probably by the time this airs, it'll probably already be out. But that's the number one thing. I did this huge survey. Like I interviewed, traveling, like potential traveling therapists and what held them back. And it kept coming up like the time zone management, like just trying to manage that schedule thing. So I actually made this AI tool, like it's called the traveling therapist time zone tool. I made it with ChatGPT. Like I made a back on the back end, I made a GPT and it like manages time zones perfectly for therapists. This thing
oh,
is amazing.
beautiful.
But you just really you put in where you're sitting, where your clients are sitting, and tell it to create the perfect schedule for you. And it just does magic. It's like really cool. So
That's amazing,
I'm
Kim.
glad you brought that up.
Oh, thank you for
Um,
your service. That's
yeah, because I was like, I've got to fix this because it's just, yeah, I have the same problem. Even if it's just like central versus Eastern, like even parts of Florida are central time zone. If you go a little bit
yep,
northwest, it's like, oh my God, did the time just change? Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
I
You got
totally get it.
my philosophy is travel is what makes my life worth living, and
Yeah.
therapy is my work. It's my career. I like it a lot. Sports social work, I love it a lot. But sometimes it is work. Sometimes it
Yeah.
gets in the way of me being in Denver, Colorado, or in Mexico City, or, in Toronto. It gets in the way of like me experiencing where I am. And
Mm.
that's no one's fault. I adore my clients with or without that barrier. It's a matter of, navigating around that. So I think my balance, and again, this is a year of me trial and error, check in on me in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time. I think being a traveling therapist for me coincides with also me being a part-time therapist when I'm traveling. I
Yeah.
am not at a point in my career where I can really take a ton of time off consistently. I am taking a lot of time off for the first time ever, and I'm very
Nice.
excited about that.
Oh, good.
But this was potentially a once in a, I won't say a lifetime or career. This will be happening again. But
Yeah.
maybe every 5 years. I'm not going to be
Mhm.
able to take a month off again next year. And nor do I
Mhm.
really want to. Like, this is really going to be a special time for me. And of course, we can get into that if there's room for it.
Yeah.
But taking traveling and being part time, being selective about my clients who are doing really well and don't need to see me weekly or even bi-weekly. We can condense it
Yeah.
to one session while I'm away, or we can do the check-in method and see how
Yeah.
things are going. Because time zones don't necessarily matter.
Yeah, that's true, and I'm so glad you said that because I was just gonna ask you, like, how are you gonna manage that taking a whole month, you know? I mean, for me, for example, like, I used to have really high acuity clients, like, I'm trained in EMDR, and I used to and I'm a certified substance abuse counselor and all of that, so I used to, like, really see these high intensity clients, but I quickly learned, as, like, a traveling therapist, like, I didn't wanna carry that heavy of a caseload anymore, I just couldn't, it was, like, too exhausting, like, trying to do all of it at the same time, so I would just love to hear, like, your methodology, like, your trial and error around, "Okay, how am I gonna do this? If I've got these clients I'm see every week or maybe every other week, how am I gonna move them out to a month? Like, what am I gonna do to, like, mitigate that?"
Definitely. My approach is very collaborative with my clients.
Mm.
Treatment is collaborative. It's an agreement, it's a contract because I don't have high acuity. So I don't
Yes.
to present safety contracts or things like that to my folks. So with
Nice.
the collaboration of me saying, "Hey, I'm going to Mexico City, which is my favorite destination." Or I'm going to be on the same time zone, but I'm going to be traveling. I'm still working, let's make sure this works, but also me introducing by modeling what my boundaries are too. I always love to tell my clients because some of them get worried about this. Like, if you're seeing me, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
Me
Oh,
being
I love
virtual,
that.
me being virtual means that you're doing like you'll be okay. Like I
That's
am
great.
here. I'm not firing you. We're good. But I won't be as connected. And that's good
Yes.
for all of us. This
Mm.
is, again, I'll use the word modeling again. This is me like putting to practice what it's like for me to be a human for the first time ever as well. This is the first time I'm
Yeah.
doing life. So
Yeah.
practicing this, seeing the flexibility and the fluidity of it, being very gracious with my clients, my gratitude is off the charts
Love
of
that.
them being able to offer me that flexibility. So again, it's collaborative. My specialty, since that might be relevant, is sport social work. So I see mostly athletes. And then outside of my athlete realm, because I started in private practice seeing anybody who was finding my number or email, I see a lot of anxiety and adult women with ADHD and a little bit of trauma work as well.
Nice.
So when I do trauma, I'm not practicing EMDR. It's
Mhm.
mostly narrative style therapy, getting connected with coping skills, learning the whys of, well, why do I think this way? Why do I process this way? And, the power of
Yeah.
your story.
Yeah.
So those are low acuity. They're not in crisis. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
not really monitoring day by day. So I am very fortunate that that affords me the ability to get on a plane or get in my car.
So are we talking like college athletes or like any age, really?
Any age, my practice is open from my youngest right now is 11, and
Oh,
11 is like cutting it just because it's talk therapy style and it's virtual,
yeah.
keeping that connection and that concentration. And then I have clients who are going for the Champions Tour in golf.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, whole
Wow.
lifespan of athletes, but I would say my bread and butter is probably teens and young adults. Love
Yeah.
egos, love the attitude of teenagers. It's my favorite. So that's my sweet spot.
Oh my God. I have like so much respect for people that can see teenagers. So you kind of alluded to you've got this month thing coming up. You said maybe we'll talk about it. Is it something like you want to share, like that maybe other therapists might be inspired by? Because
Of
I'd love to talk
course.
about it.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, my one of my journal questions in my little booklet is what's a question you love answering? And it's
Ah,
where are you going next and what's your next tattoo? Because I also collect tattoos.
I love that.
So yes, I would love to. Because I finally finished booking the last thing that I needed.
Oh, awesome.
I One of my best friends is doing his PhD research in South India, in Mysore, India. So
Wow.
India was never really on my radar growing up. My heritage is Indian as well, so it's a little
Oh,
surprising, but
neat.
I it came across that I could visit him, I could spend some time there, and I'm like, "Let's do it." Like, otherwise, it's not on my
Wow.
radar. It's not a country I would personally be inspired to check off my list, but if I have someone who knows the area, is in touch with it, like, let's do it. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna visit him. His bucket list trip is to Vietnam, so I'm gonna see him for 5 days, then we're trekking to Vietnam, specifically Hanoi and the bays up there. We're gonna do one of those, like, really scenic
Oh,
cruises.
oh my gosh.
I'm taking my behind to Thailand by myself for 9 days. So,
Wow. Oh
I'm
my
s
gosh.
I'm very excited.
Oh, that's gonna be great. Oh my gosh. You'll have to come back and tell us how it all went and everything, especially if you saw some clients along the way, you know?
Yes, I right now I'm in the point of telling all of my clients. Some of them have been like
Okay.
there were whispers maybe a month ago of like what I was planning on doing, but now it's like, by the way, if I see you monthly, like let's get this
Yeah.
planned, or if I see you bi-weekly, we've got a couple of sessions before I'm out.
Awesome.
I over winter break, so to speak, so the Christmas and New Year's time, I was out of touch. I was completely disconnected. And so I told them, comparing to that trip, I will be more connected than I was for the holidays. So
Okay.
I'll be on call, so to speak, but not on your timeline.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great.
Yeah, you'll be
That's
awake,
awesome.
I'll be asleep. So if we need to get creative about how I see you, we'll get creative, but you're going to have to give me a couple of business days to get it acclimated to that.
Yeah, that's great. Has everybody been, like, super cool with it? If they're like, "Yeah, got
Yeah.
it. We can
Yeah.
we got this. I could do this. It's
Mhm.
good."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. Especially there's a good chance, my theory is there's a good chance that my clients will feel better knowing that there is an on-call type situation as
Mm,
opposed to I have to hold on to this for 3 weeks while or 2
yeah.
weeks while Tara's away. So this feels more organic to me as well. I don't love being someone who works with people who disconnects from them from time to time. I don't know why
Mhm.
that feels so inorganic to me. I am a
Yeah.
whole person with and without my profession, but
Mhm.
I think maybe a lot of us can connect with this it doesn't just feel like job, career, profession. It's very much like I'm never not a social worker.
Yes. Oh, yes.
There's still an aspect of that that's very much rooted in who I am, how I present.
Mhm.
And just because I get paid to show up in a way doesn't mean I wouldn't have shown up anyway that way.
That makes perfect sense. So how far out would you recommend, since you've done this before, like telling your clients or starting to prepare them, you know? Because, I feel like there needs to be like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is. A couple weeks, couple months, like, hey, it's December, I'm leaving in May. Like, is it like how far out do you feel like is a good timeline to get your clients prepared?
That's a really good question. I wish I had like a harder rule
Mhm.
or guideline for how some people knew a month ago, and then this is the first week I'm really
Yeah.
making sure I tell people.
That
I have a couple of clients who are on the spectrum, and so I'm
Mhm.
being very, very mindful with I think I'm being the most mindful with them because it's very disruptive to their structure.
Yeah.
And one of them is under 18, so I'm working with their parent very closely on how so the parent knows, and then they're helping to bring in the information when they believe it'll be the most supportive.
Mhm.
And they have support, they have everything they need, so I'm not too
Sure.
worried. But
Sure.
maybe I got lucky because it's a mid-February trip is when I'm starting, so this
Okay.
is like the week where I'm hunkering down to let people know it's happening. Where people fall through the cracks, Kim, is when they cancel or
Yeah.
reschedule, and now we've got, like,
Right.
another week lost where I'm like, "Oh, shoot."
If you've got
Right.
anything important to talk about, let's do it now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's a good whenever that session of reviewing coping skills and resources, that's the organic time to really touch on that. It's
Mhm.
when I go, and I would argue there isn't a bad time to kind of bring up as an intervention. If I'm not in our scheduled session, especially if you're someone who likes recurring sessions, I'm not here. What do you do to regulate when you don't have our Thursday morning to touch base about what's going on in the week or how things are working or not working? What's going on? What's your system? What's your plan? So
Mhm.
that maybe if someone's so inspired, that's a really good warm up for if someone is planning a trip or someone is looking to be a traveling therapist or just travel without being a therapist on their travels. How
Yeah.
can come in. That could be a really helpful intervention, perhaps.
Yeah, I love that so much because, I do run into, like, in my private coaching and stuff, people that want to be traveling therapists, and they're always worried, like, okay, what if I take the time off and then the client realizes they don't need me and then I lose my entire caseload? Like, it's this whole spiral, And I'm always like, I mean, more clients will come. It will be okay. And if it happens that way, it just feels like, maybe it was supposed to, but a lot of people really stress out about that. Like, I can't skip like 3 weeks with a client. It's going to be a disaster. So I like that we're talking about this and just kind of
Mhm.
giving it some, like, it's okay, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Eh,
One of my favorite, I don't know if it was a peer or a mentor who told me this, but one of my favorite lessons was our clients aren't that fragile. They're not that fragile. I've worked with childhood trauma. I've worked in child welfare where people are extra like cautious, careful.
Yeah.
And now I worked with teenagers. So
Yeah.
there may be like the grit of teenagers is something that
Yeah.
bottle that, sell it, I'm buying. But that was what someone told me is like, if I'm going in with some knowledge and some background about what's going on with this kid, and I want to sit there and like really like take my time, that kid that may not be in the room with them when I'm sitting with them.
Right.
And maybe that's one reason I like working with
Yeah.
teens so much is that I can really poke at it. I can really like get in there and
Mhm.
teach them those skills by like testing their boundaries in a really proactive but productive way
Yeah.
of like, well, let's talk about it. And they're like, we don't need to. I'm like, dope. That's great. Great.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I got a similar lesson too at some point where it was like, okay, you're not like God, and you're not like the end all and be all for these people. Like, they were totally fine before you. They'll be totally fine after you. They'd be totally fine if they went to a different therapist. Like, it's
Yes.
fine.
Yes. I would be
Yeah,
so silly to think that I was the ideal therapist for everyone in my current case.
exactly.
That would be such a
Exactly.
silly thought.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Just like, okay, let's just like look at reality here. It's like totally fine, probably. I mean, unless they're, of course, suicidal or something like that. And
Yeah.
then we'd want to plan for that, right? Maybe have another therapist that we know that could pick up and take over if a crisis happened or something like that. Make sure they have, the all the crisis information that they need to get help. And of course, you're going to be on call anyway,
Yeah.
if somebody needs something. So
I
yeah.
have my vacation responder on my email. I also, maybe this is helpful. I have a group practice that sees people virtually and in person near me
Oh,
geographically.
perfect. Yeah.
So they have openings and I feel very confident in referring if someone was like, all right, Tara, you're not available till tomorrow because, it's whatever time where you are. I'm going to just go ahead and call them and see if I can get in sooner. Totally fine by me.
Yeah. Love that. Love that message so much. I hope you guys listening hear that because that really is something that comes up a lot. It's like,
Oh, do your
but I,
networking.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Have some people you can fall back on, especially alone, solo, private practice, telehealth, traveling. Have just some backups already that you know. Yeah, for real. And that's a good referral source too. If you establish those relationships with people, I think. So tell us what else you're doing because not only are you doing this practice, you've also got this other thing you're working on. So I'd love to talk about that and how it came
Yeah.
to be and what you're doing. Because part of what we do talk about on this podcast a lot, especially for traveling therapists and in the portable practice method, is I've got a whole module on other like income streams away from that one-to-one client work. So I'd love to talk about this thing you have going on and share with the listeners, like how it came about and what you're doing. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. So I have what's called a mastermind that I started in October of last year. So it's still my little baby toddler.
Yeah.
Um, and essentially, a mastermind, for people who may have never heard that term before, it's a group collaborative, it's exchanging of ideas, bringing up problems to request solutions from like minded folks. So I have been a part of masterminds that are entrepreneurial in nature. So they're for business owners, they're for entrepreneurs, mostly women who are trying to get their business off the ground or get out of a couple of issues or rough spots, rough
Mhm.
patches with their business. So marketing comes up a lot, how to find a good accountant, how to deal with social media marketing is always one that comes up time after time.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I decided that, well, I've heard, rumor is therapists are notoriously bad business owners for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
I don't think that's a rumor.
That I heard the rumor, I
Yeah.
attached myself to it and said, well, I think a mastermind specifically for mental health professionals would be wise.
Love that.
So I was brought on to a Google group by a local psychiatrist. And so I was networking with him and asking, I have this idea. You started this group. So are you seeing a need for something like this? Does your group facilitate that? Is there a need for something that's more like meeting focused as opposed to like sending emails to your listserv? He
Mhm.
thought it was a good idea, wanted to be a part of it. And so there it became. So I have this mastermind. It meets monthly virtually. Right now, it's localized for South Florida mental health professionals, so therapists of all letters of the alphabet
Wow.
and psychiatrists, other behavioral health professionals. I open it up to students as well and interns,
Oh,
so people who
nice.
are curious about what it's like to be a business owner and what we deal with, what our struggles are, because there's nothing like getting into an industry without knowing what you're really getting into.
Really? Oh my gosh. I see in
So
the Facebook groups all the time, people posting like, they're not even licensed yet, and they're like, Did I make a mistake? Is this the wrong career for me?" It's like, it's not as easy as it looks a lot
yeah,
of times. I mean, once you get it going, you get a good referral network, it's not so bad, but there are pitfalls for sure. Yeah.
definitely. And I think that ties into where we get the being bad business owners. There's so much involved in the work that we do already, like the grassroots
Mhm.
that we do that we got into because we don't want to get away from. I love people. I am a human person.
Yeah.
So I want to stay in that work. But also it's not always great for me practicing being a person too. It's not,
Mhm.
it give and take, right? And a lot of give. And I don't hate it. I don't dislike it. I don't resent it. But this is kind of a way to flex a different muscle and get that networking in, which I absolutely love. As of right now, the group is free. I've
Mhm.
been a part of
Nice.
masterminds that have like subscription style service or like membership fees, things like
Mhm.
that. And if this grows and takes off, because I want to treat it like group therapy, where I don't want it to get so big that I'm managing a mastermind of 20 people, that doesn't sound super productive. That sounds
Yeah.
more like a seminar or workshop or presentation. And then
Mhm.
maybe breaking it off into more like smaller regional, whether it's geographic groups or maybe interest groups, like having a traveling therapist mastermind or whatever, sports
Yeah.
social worker mastermind, things like that. So
Yeah. I
maybe
love
down the
that.
road, it becomes a membership type
Mhm.
situation. But right now, it's not calling so much of my effort where it's worth me charging for it. I like the
Right.
community of it for now.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. And that's kinda how all of my income streams started, with just like, "Oh, this is a problem, and I know some people that are also having this problem, so let's talk about it." And then like, "Gosh, do you think I could scale this and it would help a lot of other people?" And it
Yes.
kinda grows from there?
Exactly. It's a seed and maybe it takes, maybe it stays local.
Yeah.
Uh, but the mastermind model has been something that served entrepreneurs and business owners for a long time.
Yep.
And if we want to be better at things like I'm sure social media marketing made someone cringe who's listening
Yeah.
because we need to be better. They want to be better at it or whatever the case is. And that's exactly what the group is about, is
Oh
figuring
my
out those
gosh.
little gaps.
I don't even think I'd be where I am with any of my businesses if I didn't have like a mastermind or like, business besties or whatever you want to call them, like that we're
Yeah, yeah.
going through the exact same thing
Mhm.
and helped me figure it out, along the way. Cause it's a journey. If you've never done any of this stuff before, it's like, how do you know how to do it? We're
Agreed.
like therapists, like, whatever. But then it's like this whole other like beast, like there's so many aspects to it and you have to almost become an expert in everything. So it's so good to have a group to connect to that's going through the same thing or has already been there, done that a little bit,
Yeah.
to give you some insights or pitfalls to look out for. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like in grad school and our internships and our placements, we hear about, connecting with other peers or mentors or getting connected about the clinical work. And
Yeah.
so the mastermind kind of gets us outside of the clinical part because consultation groups are aplenty, you know,
Yeah.
find your people to connect with and talk about your caseload if you need to or get referrals. The mastermind is more about, the business owner therapist or the business minded therapist.
Yeah. I love that so much. So how would somebody listening find you if they wanted to join something like that at some of the traveling therapists here listening?
Yeah, I think maybe it might be the easiest to kind of just direct to my .com, to my website.
Okay.
Uh, my practice name is Finish Line Mindset. So
Nice.
that's my .com, that's my Instagram, that's my TikTok, that's how you'll find me. And I have a contact page. I think that would be the most streamlined way to get folks to me.
Love that, like, consistent branding. Another
Yeah,
tip, right?
I got
Consistent
like,
branding. Try to get the same name across all domains. Yeah, that's really smart. Well, thank you. It's Tara, right? I think it said Tara in the beginning, but is it Tara?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tara Wells. Thank you so much for coming. Is there anything else you want to say to anybody listening?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. 2025 has a lot in store for me. I didn't get to touch on it, but I'm
Oh,
scaling this year
tell
too.
us, tell
I'm
us, tell us.
hiring, so I'm
Yeah,
hiring sports social workers. I'm trying to stay in that lane,
I love
um,
it.
which is going to facilitate a lot for me to travel and manage staff and still have my caseload. I'm
Yeah.
not getting. If any of my clients happen to be listening, they're like, I have some lifers that are like, "You're not firing me," and they're
Yeah.
right. I'm hiring. They'll be with me for as long as they choose to. But I'll be scaling, so I'm hoping that that facilitates the part-time clinical piece and
Hmm.
gets me more into, like, that supervisor role. I'm gonna be a qualified supervisor this year as well, so lots of things
Wow.
that when I talk about it out loud, it sounds like I'm doing so much and I'm spreading myself out so wide, but the goal is I'm at my best when I have different things on my calendar. I
Hmm.
have clinical sessions, I have supervision, I have a networking meeting, I have a podcast interview. Like these things make my
Yeah.
day feel so rich and full and not
Love that.
draining.
I love that so much. Yeah, diversifying and just
Mhm.
yeah, I love that too. I would get so bored. I mean, I have like lifers too. I have like 3 or 4 clients that just I'll probably never get rid of them, but the rest, I mean, I've really scaled out of clinical work a lot. And I love it. I love the different, things going on. Like I've got this, I've got a business meeting later, I've got a partnership meeting later. It's just like fun,
Mhm.
exciting to be able to just kind of like spread out. And that's the cool thing about being a therapist. And part of the message with this podcast is you don't just have to do one-to-one client work. Like there's
Yeah.
so much you can do. And people like you are such an inspiration. And to hear that you're scaling instead of like group practice, why scaling, like bringing
Yeah.
in people. And that's very exciting.
I
Yeah.
am thrilled about it. And then, of course, with sports being international, who knows where my trout like, everything's a
Yes.
business trip at this point too. So
Why not? You can write it off somehow. That's perfect.
mhm.
That's a good mindset to have. Like, how can I incorporate travel in and write it off? That would be amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate it. Thank you
You're
for what you
welcome.
offer with this podcast and opening up all these possibilities. It's really cool to hear that there's so much familiarity with this topic.
Thank you.